Zach? So the first thing I would like to do, though, we're going to take our attendance here. All of the Audit and Finance Committee members. I'll start with Mr. Mendick.
Thank you. Rich Mendick, District 36.
Mark Grimm, District 29.
Brenda Paxton, District 8.
Joe O'Brien, District 25.
Paul Bergdorf, District 23.
Bill Clay, 12.
Wanda Willingham, number 3. All right, let's get started. Mr. Calderon, it's good to see you this evening.
Good evening, Madam Chairwoman. Thank you for inviting me. And I have with me my Director of Operations, George Penn, and our County Budget Director, Sean Farron. If I could just make a couple of opening comments.
Speak up, please.
Thank you, I will. Just a couple of opening comments, if I could. This budget was crafted, as we always have since I've been here. I've been here now 6 years. I've loved every minute of it, with the county's general mission in mind. Just to go over that very, very briefly, that mission is to maintain a compassionate, progressive, collaborative, and inclusive government that provides its residents with quality public services to support a safe, healthy, equitable, and vibrant community. We think this budget, with its focus on maintaining the high-quality services that Albany County's residents have come to expect and deserve, that maintains a strong fund balance, and that holds the line on taxes, with even giving a very slight decrease to the tax rate, achieves that mission statement. And I want to thank the collaboration that we've had with the legislature in working with us to achieve this result, not only today, but over the past 6 years that I've had the pleasure of working with this legislature. And I also want to thank the members of the county executive staff. I've been in county government for a long, long time. I started in county government back in the 70s. I had a brief sabbatical when I worked for a few years, about 20 years with the city of Albany, but I have never had the pleasure of working with a more professional, hardworking staff than the men and women who work in the county executive's office and in the Office of Management and Budget. And for their efforts day in and day out in producing this budget, I'd like to thank them. It's my one time during the year that I get that opportunity, and I'm just so proud to be affiliated and associated with all of them. And now, Madam Chairwoman, I'm prepared to go through our executive budget or to answer any questions you might have with regard to the general budget as a whole.
All right, very good. All right, I'll start with questions from the members. Mr. Mendick.
Thank you. The first line in the budget is the salary for the county executive, and there's a significant increase in that salary. In your response, you noted as 16% as a one-time increase at the end of the term. Can you explain the justification for that significant amount of raise?
Sure, Mr. Mendick. So, as you accurately pointed out, there's only one time an elected official is able to, or any elected official is able to achieve a salary increase for a particular line. That's statutorily, and that happens at the end of a term for whoever he or she may have as the successor in the following term. So with regard to why it's done this way at the end of a term, that's that reason. As to the amount, the 16%, we're happy to provide you with data, and I'll have the budget director submit it to this committee that shows you comparables with other county executives in the state where we think that this is an equitable adjustment to that line.
Well, we've done that homework already. And just to give you a couple of examples, if we look at counties, and there are not a lot of counties that are our size, but let's take a look at a county such as Monroe, which has 744,000 people. Their county executive makes about 120,000. Erie, which has 3 times our population, their county executive makes 103. The only one that even approximates this is Dutchess has 297 close to ours, and they make 139, 140, and that's what we're sitting at now. So as we look at these comparables, we don't quite see the justification, but I'm anxious to see what you can provide. The other question, go ahead, I'm sorry.
I'm not to interrupt you, but
No,
I
that's all
definitely
right.
could add a little bit something here, and we'll
Sure.
definitely respond to that. Monroe County was recently set for the new person that came in. They had a long tenured executive that made greater than that 120,000, so to that point, we can go
You can
on.
tell us what that is, and
Yeah.
we can make it comparable. Sure. The only other question that I have is that the 16% is difficult, in my mind, to justify when we ask our employees to accept, by union contract, 2% per year. How do we, I think it puts us in an awkward position of providing the top end with higher percentage increases than we're willing to give our rank and file.
So noted.
Thank you.
I recognize Mr. Bergdorf.
I was just going to ask, has anyone done a calculation? Do I remember incorrectly that 4 years ago, and I watched the budget pass as an observer at that point in time, that there were, for elected officials, 3% raises per year for 4 years?
Correct.
Could you tell us what the 16% yields on a compound basis over 4 years? Because at that point in time, there was a 1% differential between the elected officials and the collectively bargained, but I can't do the compounding in my head to know what 16% over 4 years, is it 3% again, or 3.125 compounded, or whatever? But I think that would be helpful in comparing to what we did 4 years ago, or what the legislature did. I did not have a vote in it.
Correct.
Yeah. And would you like it compared to if it was 4, or would you like other numbers associated with that, or just that is good enough?
Well, I mean, you have proposed a $20,000 increase. So the question is, what is that percentage? What would be a 2? What would be a 3? And what is that?
Correct.
Just so
And I think that's
I
what
think
Mr.
that's a
Allen was
fair-
asking, right?
that's a
Would you like some
fair
comparisons?
comparison.
Yep,
To see what we're actually doing here by doing it all in one line.
we'll get you there.
Thank you.
Mr. Brown.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, we've just negotiated all these union contracts at 2%, and there are numerous proposals for 16% increases for elected officials, and I don't know how an elected official can ask for a much bigger raise than the people that work for him. I think we can save ourselves a lot of anxiety and a lot of angst if we agree that we are not going to give any elected official anything more than 2%, which is what the people who are running the county are going to be getting.
Are there any other questions? Okay, I recognize Mr. Bullock.
How did you come up with a number on the tax break, and what is it? Is it another $10 for each resident?
So, as you can see, and I go through this in much more detail when the revenue
Comes in.
presentations
Okay.
at the back end. But page 29 should entail most of the recent history.
Thank you.
I believe it's the last 6 or 7 years. We'll briefly go through that, though, during the revenue section.
So the decrease won't be any more or less than last year?
Slightly less.
Slightly less?
Okay,
Okay.
Before Mr. Bailey gets started, Mr. Grimm, I would like to address that when Mr. Bailey gives his presentation on the management and budget.
Okay?
Is that all right?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Yes, Mr. Bergeron.
I have one more question. You are I personally believe that the county executive has a right to structure their office any way they want within their budget. But could you sort of take us through your organizational changes that you're proposing?
Sure.
And how you feel that will benefit your operation?
So we've eliminated two positions, a senior policy analyst and a special assistant to the executive. We've created one new position, a director of policy. That position is to reflect the responsibilities of the person who is now performing essentially the director of policy functions, Mike McLaughlin, in our office. And we tried to do in doing those combinations and making the elimination of those two positions and the creation of the new director line is keep our 2020 proposed budget, you'll note, under what our 2019 adjusted salary budget was. So there's actually a slight decrease from the 2020 budget when compared to the 2019 budget in the overall organizational structure.
I don't see that, if you look at the,
Well, if you look at the adjusted personnel services subtotal, it's $1,138,549. For 2019, it's, right? $1,135,239 for 2020. So there's a
you're just on that
slight
part.
Just looking at salaries.
Well, yeah,
Salaries, not
that's
personnel.
Yeah. I mean, healthcare rises at,
Right, you compare
3 to
personnel.
5%.
oh, yeah, okay,
Apples
you're in the
to-
salary, okay.
Yeah, apples
yes.
to apples.
Yeah, I asked about the organizational structure.
Are there any other questions? If not, I want to thank you for coming this evening.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's always a pleasure and honor to be
It's
with
good
you.
to see you. What I would like to do is, I would like to take the coroners next, please.
I didn't hear you, sorry.
Good evening, Mr. Chairwoman and committee. I'll be happy to answer any questions pertaining to the coroner's budget.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Kavanaugh. Would any of the members like to start with some questions from Mr. Kavanaugh? Yes, Mr. Bergdorf.
I just had, once again, I'm trying to understand here. You submit your budget to the county executive for inclusion.
Correct.
So did you submit it with the proposed pay structure?
No,
No.
You did not?
that was just recently done. Just recently done, after, so that was not submitted with his budget. I
Okay,
apologize for that.
okay, so it's not like the county executive rejected your proposal?
No,
And you're making it directly to the legislature?
correct, correct. In regards to the senior coroner position, I've been senior coroner for 15 years. The ones that you see here, my pay is the same as everybody else's. If it goes through, fine. If it doesn't go through, it's not going to change me one way or another. But I have many extra duties as the senior coroner, besides my normal work schedule with the coroner's office in regards to the day-to-day operation of the office.
I'd like to ask a question.
Sure, Wanda.
So I see where the title here, there is, it says senior coroner, all right? Can you tell me, as senior coroner, are you responsible for the day-to-day operations of the office?
Yes, I am.
And can you tell me in what respect would you,
Regards to budgeting, any issues with the office, complaints, I'm the one that deals with them. Contracts with Albany Med last year stating that they were totally going to shut down their morgue. It basically really fell on me to work to find another facility that would do our work. And we've been out at Ellis doing just about 3/4 of our cases out at Ellis. Things like that, along, like I said, with the day-to-day operation of the office. Scheduling to the doctor, scheduling coroners.
and so you make the reports?
Complaints. Yes,
Okay, as far as staff is concerned, are they under your supervision?
yes, they are.
Yes, Mr. Bergeron.
I know we had a robust dialogue about Albany Med and their T4 autopsies and a transition to Ellis. I see in 2019, $191,000 for fees for services. Is that where the Albany Med fees were, the increased fees?
Yes, yes, and then they upped their fees to $2,000
Yeah.
within a month's time notice they gave us, and that was towards the end of last year. And it was either take it or go somewhere else.
Yep.
So that's why the increase of $300,000. But prior to the end of last year, we were doing 2 weeks a month out at Ellis.
Okay. But I guess my question is, are we comfortable that what you're requesting for 2020, is that 100% of Ellis, or you phased out
I'm
Albany
working,
Med? Is that
it all
a
depends.
is that a hard number where we're actually going to see $140,000 savings?
It's possibly, I'm working, it all depends on the doctor, the pathologist. Right now, we have a shortage of pathologists. They don't want to do this work. So, right now, we are working with a pathologist in Rochester that could be coming to our area to work out at Ellis, do this work out there. And if that happens, I mean, right now, this past month, we've been doing 3 weeks out in Ellis and 1 week at Albany Med. So hopefully, within the next 4, 5, 6 months, we're going to be doing 90-95% of our cases at Ellis. So that's going to save us with that figure. But I can't guarantee it because I'm not so certain the doctor is going to work out.
Okay, do you have a contingency built in anywhere, or where in the event that it doesn't work out and you have
The 495 requested.
Where am I looking? On what line?
You're looking, you should be looking at
Laboratory fees.
44048.
Laboratory fees and services.
Under contractual expenses?
I see fees for services, 44046.
The next one down. They have fees.
Yeah, on page
Left fees.
217.
That
217.
fees for service that you're looking at, Paul, is transportation, people that come to do remote screens. Okay, so if you want to go down for the laboratory fees for services,
Yeah, page 217.
That's what I thought, yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry.
And other contractual expenses.
you know, I firmly believe Albany Med is probably going to shut that facility totally down. They went out of that business.
So what we're really saying is that we're requesting the whole 445,
Requesting a whole,
and we hope,
495.
and we hope not to expend it.
exactly. I just can't guarantee that we're not going to be doing any at Albany Med. Majority of our cases, a lot of our cases come out of Albany Med, trauma cases.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions?
Yeah.
Mr. Grimm?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I just want some clarification on why you went around the county executive and didn't submit to him these big pay raises in the first place. Could you be clear?
I did not go around the county executive. We were just kind of late in doing it when we did our regular budget. You know, a couple years ago, I thought about making a senior coroner position, and then I just stayed away from it. But, you know, I could really justify the increase. The girls in our office, the secretary, compared to some of the other offices, she's on the low end.
Well, the biggest pay raise is for the senior coroner.
That's correct.
That's 33%.
Right.
Could you justify that? Because that's a big number.
I could justify it.
I'd like to hear it.
I could justify it on top of my normal duties, normal schedule being a coroner. I basically am in charge of the office. When there's an issue with the office, when there's a problem with scheduling or doctors, I'm probably the only person you ever seen here from the office over the past 15 years. Any complaints? There's extra work involved.
You were aware of the salary when you ran for office.
Exactly.
No, you were aware of what the salary was
And,
when you
you know, like
chose to
I
run for
just said,
office.
if this doesn't go through, I'll be here again next year. But I could definitely justify an increase. But if it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen.
Thank you.
As an elected official, that's just how I am.
Are there any other questions?
Well,
Mr. Miller?
I guess I'm a little concerned. I understand your justification stuff. This is, you're saying senior coroner, but you're elected official. There is no elected official title of senior coroner. Is that
Correct.
Is the election part of it also? Or?
no, not the election part. It's kind of like the chair of the legislature. He's got extra duties as a chair, doesn't he get more?
Yes.
That's all. Like I said, if it happens, fine. If it doesn't happen, not going to lose any sleep over it.
Are there any other questions? Mr. Kavanaugh, I just want to thank you for the service that you have provided over these many years.
Wanda, you're one person who really knows, and I know Sean does, what we do. I've worked with you several times. I know I've worked with Sean on things, so I appreciate everything you guys do for our office and have over the years.
Well, thank you for coming
Okay?
tonight.
Thank you. See you.
All right, we're going to
pass that to
now
Sean.
go with the comptroller.
Thank you.
Comptroller? Can't find it.
Good morning, Madam Chairman, or good afternoon, good evening, and members of the committee, and those other members of the legislature staff. This is my last budget presentation, and the major change in the budget that we had a hand in is an attempt to replace a person who is leaving and retiring, John Brannigan, who has been the county's accountant and been here 40 years. And I believe that you're going to need to hire someone with a CPA to be able to do part of what John does. So we did put in that additional position for $110,000 for that. That would obviously be up to my successor as to what they do, but that's the major change within the budget. You know, it's been an honor and a privilege to serve here, and any questions I can try to answer, I will, and if we can't answer it, we'll get to them.
All right, do I have any questions from the members for Mr. Connors and Mr. Minnick?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Mr. O'Connor, the questions that I have for the salary increase for the comptroller's position are similar to what I asked for the county exec. We're talking about a $20,000 increase. Do you have off the top of your head what that percentage is?
Well, I guess the easiest thing to answer that is that I was surprised to see that as anybody else. And my first thought, obviously we look at our own budget first, my first thought was this was, oh hooray, he's gone. So, but it turned out I think it was other stuff. If I had to hazard a guess to that, I would I would suspect that part of the reason and rationale of the raise and a lump sum was to try and be able to pay other members of other staff in the county. And I think it was driven, by the DAs, but that's just mine. I had no input on this, and I was as surprised as you were at my success.
So if I hear what you're saying, well, in order to have enough room to increment up other staff members, that you had to increment up the comptroller? Is that what you were saying?
No, I think that might have been, you're asking me for the theory behind it.
Gotcha.
I can't comment on it in my office because I didn't.
Put it in it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Grimm?
Yeah, Madam Chair, yeah, just to be clear, Mr. Connors, you recommended that the pay be 125, which is what the pay was last year. But this was up by the county executive by 20 grand.
That's correct.
Am I correct in that?
You're correct.
All right, thank you.
Can I just get a little bit of a clarification?
Okay, Chair recognizes
Oh,
Mr. Bergeron.
I'm very sorry.
That's good.
Madam Chair. When you put your request in, did you leave the salary flat, or did you put it in at a 2% increase?
No, we left it flat. It would be, the raises that 4 years ago that were put in were done in the legislative process, the session. So we left it at the same salary.
Assuming that the legislature would make some,
Yeah, if they put for the non-union and union represented employees a raise, the assumption would be that they would make that adjustment for our office as well. So the first I found out about this was at last Wednesday's hearing, or last Wednesday's meeting.
so other than the new position of CPA, is everything else tracked at
Yes.
what is basically the
That's
2%
correct.
rate?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Oh, no, excuse me, there is an exception, I'm sorry. If you look at the account clerk 2 title, that's the one in 16104. That person did pick up additional duties. We've got a number of people retiring and leaving at the end of the year, so that person has picked up additional duties already, and the salary increase we put in for that person for that reason.
Chair recognizes Ms. McLean-Lane.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Thank you for coming, Mr. Connors. I have a quick question. Earlier, the county executive staff mentioned that Erie County was reduced down to 103 because it had an incoming elected official. I believe that that's what they stated. And then previous to that, with the outgoing official, it was higher, and that's why it's so low now. Was that your understanding? Because I'm pretty sure it was mine.
That might have been the attitude 24 years ago. But no, I am not familiar with the Erie County East budget, so I can't answer your question.
Okay. Well, it's what I heard from the
Yeah, I would hazard to guess, as a former legislator, I would hazard to guess that if they made the change, prior to the election. You can't change an elected official's salary during the term, but this is actually before, if a new person is coming in 2020.
Well, thank you, Mr. Connors.
All right, any other questions? No more questions on Mr. Connors. We'd like to
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you,
for all of
everybody.
your service through the years. All right, we're going to go back in order again, and we're going to go to our county clerk, after which we will take the district attorney. Good evening, Mr. Hidley. How are you?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman, and members of the Audit Finance Committee. It's an honor to be here. This is my 6th time coming before this committee for the budget for 2020. The budget that I've submitted had some very minor changes to it. One of the changes I've asked for in this budget are my non-union county deputy county clerks, executive deputy county clerk, and an archivist is on top of the 2% raise that they are going to be receiving. I've asked for an additional 3%, which comes out to about $10,700 total amount for those 5 positions for the 2020 cycle. It would be the one and only time I ask for a request such as this. And I justified this because, number one, My top-level staff has worked hard on local government records management improvement fund grants. We've gotten over $450,000 worth of grants that they have personally wrote and taken time and actually dedicated time at their own homes to get these grants written. Thanks to the county legislature, we've accomplished so much in technology needs for the Albany County Clerk's Office, and I consider us the #1 county clerk's office in the state of New York because of the efforts that have been done through the legislature and my office and my staff. We have a tremendous amount of turnover in my staff. A clerk 1 and a laborer, it comes in at a very low salary, so my deputies are constantly training new employees along with their additional duties of what they are responsible for doing. And I just felt that this $10,700 would be well spent by the county to give these employees the 3% additional raise on top of the 2. The other line item that's very substantial is we've dropped the codification project line item from $50,000 to $20,000. And the reason why we did that is we're very close to the end of this project. We have submitted all of our final materials to General Code. They are going through it as we speak. They're going to check to make sure that we don't have any documents in there that are both duplicates. So we should be prepared in early 2020 with General Code to finalize this project, to complete this project. Of course, we'll have to review it once General Code is done, but we don't anticipate needing that additional $30,000. So I've dropped that line item to $20,000 in anticipation of maintenance and other proposed needs that we may have in 2020 once we are completed with the project. And Brandon, if you know a little bit more about that also.
I'm sorry, one time, I apologize.
The General Code?
Yes. So we are, as the clerk had indicated, we're in the middle of phase 2. All the documents have been provided. It is to expand a little bit the task that General Code is doing now, besides just checking for duplicates, is also to use their staff to make sure that the laws that we have on file, the laws that were adopted over the last 50 or 60 years in the legislature, to see if any of them have been superseded by state or federal law or by other guidance from other state agencies, to see if there's anything that's inconsistent. We are currently waiting for their analysis, and when they get the report back to us, then it'll be the next step in the process to figure out where to move from there, as far as if any laws need to be repealed or otherwise amended or reviewed to be consistent with state and federal law as is right now. But currently, General Code is doing that analysis.
And Albany County is going to be very proud of this project once it's completed. The general public are going to be able to get online and be able to research whatever they want to research. And as our county legislature passes new laws and resolutions, we're going to be able to submit that to General Code immediately and have it put online as quickly, as efficiently, and as I possibly can get it done for you. But this is really an #1 project. It's a project that's been ongoing since 2014. We are so close to being finished now. Basically, I open the floor to entertain any questions or comments you may have about my 2020 budget.
Yeah, I was going to ask about the General Code, so I'm glad that you spoke about it in some detail. So am I looking at it right here in that in 2019 we spent $99,000 and now we're going at 20? Or am I on the wrong page again?
No, you're right.
You're talking about county code program.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's on page 221.
We have
I'm on 223.
44050, the county code program. It was $50,000 in 2019. We're dropping it to $20,000 in 2020.
It's 221, page 221.
221 he's looking at.
It's also attached to the package that I gave you.
Yeah,
It's under county code program 1410-44050.
Thank you.
So it's going from 50 to 20?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, on day one, when we get a code, okay, the next meeting, the code is obsolete, because we're going to pass stuff, add stuff, subtract stuff.
Correct.
Where is the ongoing maintenance?
That's the
for code?
$20,000 for 2020, that's what I'm banking on.
So,
We're not sure, Paul, we're not really sure exactly what it's gonna cost for the maintenance of this yet, because this will be the first year that we'll be undertaking the process of maintaining the code that will be completed in early 2020. So I'm not sure whether this 20,000 could be way over budget, or it could be way under budget. I'm not sure at this point.
you don't actually have any estimates
I
from
do
them
not.
as to what those potential costs are?
I do not, sir, no.
Okay.
Now, this is something too, Mr. Headley, that will be available to the public,
That's correct, Madam Chairwoman.
and it will also make the legislators' jobs much easier too.
That's the overall hope.
That's our hope.
That's the overall hope.
Let's believe that.
That was entirely, when we started this in 2014, that was what we wanted to accomplish for our county legislature and our constituents and residents in Albany County.
I'd like to recognize Ms. Lakakis, please.
I was just wondering if you know if your code could interface with the Granicus, the program that we're going to be using to make our work, shall we say?
I don't know anything about that, I'm sorry.
All right, well, maybe we'll have a talk about it.
Yeah,
Give me a
I'm
call.
sorry, that's the first I've ever even heard of that.
It's our software for the legislature.
Okay.
I'd like to recognize Mr. Ward, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You had mentioned that it would be updated monthly. Was it monthly or annually usually?
No, we're gonna update this as quickly as the laws are changed in Albany County.
Okay,
Yeah, no, we're not waiting on an annual basis, no.
that's great.
Because it's online.
Yeah.
Chair recognizes Mr. Bullock.
In relation to your union employees and non-union employees, have the non-union employees overall increased faster than the regular employees?
I'm not sure what you mean by that.
Well, I mean, has your staff of non-union employees increased?
No, they have not.
Okay. So you're remaining constant on that?
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Very good. Chair recognizes Mr. Grimm.
We've actually, may
Go
I
ahead.
just comment? We've actually, last year in the budget, we created the electronic records management technician. When that position was created and we went out and filled that position, CSEA was immediately contacted and that person was put into the union right away.
Good, okay.
Mr. Grimm.
Thank you, Madam Chair. There's 16% pay raises proposed for other electeds, the county executive, the sheriff, the controller, but I noticed that you requested, and it's proposed, a 3% raise, and I'm wondering why you were left out of it. Do you know why?
Well, the legislature in 2018, I'm sorry, it was January 2018, passed a resolution authorizing a 3% raise for me for 4 years.
But I mean, in this budget, instead of a request for 16%, which is...
But he's
Well, I'm
not
not
up
able to
this
do
year.
that until it's my turn
He's not up,
for office again.
he's not approved.
Is it my understanding that your term is not the same as the rest of us?
That's correct.
Next year, right?
Mine's 2021.
Actually,
So you're operating under the last 2 years
That's
of
correct.
of the 3, 3, 3, and 3.
That's
Yep.
correct, sir.
Okay. Thank
Any
you.
other questions?
Contractual.
Because I'm sure we can see that your fees for services have gone down a little bit, like 5,000.
The fees for services have actually increased by $300. The fees for services is for our IQS system, which was $96,000. Next request FOIL system is $4,300, that was the $300 increase. And we have $60,000 to increase the amount of deeds and mortgages we place online like we have had done in the past 2 or 3 years.
Thank you, Ms. Pottsville. Are there any other questions? Ms.
A
Lakakis?
quick one, you said that your clerks had a high turnover. I was wondering,
Yes.
to what do you attribute that?
Low salary. The starting salaries are like $27,000 and 26 something for a laborer.
Do you
I
find
just
that
can't compete with the
difficult?
other county agencies and other state agencies that, you know, they start them at $28,000, $29,000 a year. So I have a high turnover in my office.
I know that song.
Yeah, we've heard it.
They're going to the state.
That's terrible.
Take that, sis.
Do we have any questions from any of the other members? All right, Mr. Hibley, we thank you for your service, and we thank you for the excellent job you have done.
Thank you so much for having me tonight. Appreciate it very much.
It's been a long process.
Good job, Bruce.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're now here from the district attorney's office.
Yes. Madam Chairwoman, Your Honors, thank you very much. So nice to see a lot of familiar faces in the room. And some newer faces, much better looking faces than the one I present with. So, I know that this has been a very challenging year for Albany County. But I fear that it's going to be a bit more challenging, and specifically for those of us who are responsible for public safety and are charged with public safety. And I say that recognizing the Albany County Sheriff in the room. Also want to recognize the wonderful work, the increased work being done by the county coroner. Ladies and gentlemen, this is my 15th year that I've appeared before this august body and discussed public safety. Throughout those years, I have found a sounding board, people who have listened and people who have, to the best that best that you can, you've assisted in the wonderful results that we have here in Albany County in terms of our continuing downward trend in crime is something that we can all take credit for. It takes an entire community to achieve those goals. Our entire system, however, has been upended, and as of April 1st of this year, new criminal justice reforms were placed in the governor's budget. These new criminal justice reforms have summoned the greatest, the most radical change to the way that we practice here in the state since the early 70s. I would also add that these pieces of legislation were passed without one single bit of testimony from subject matter experts. As president of the District Attorneys Association this past year, what we have been doing is trying to understand exactly what these reforms mean. Specifically speaking, these reforms come in 4 different forms. It comes in bail reform, it comes in discovery reform, it comes in speedy trial reform, as well as reform to the asset forfeiture statutes. Now, each of those reforms will impact the continuum of the criminal justice system in different ways. Meaning that as I look at all of these reforms, the one that has the most significant impact on our office happens to be the discovery reform, second only to bail, and the fact that we are now a cashless bail state. And I'll get into some of those details for you. That will explain the requests that we have made here this evening. As president of DASNY, what I did after these pieces of legislation were passed is I tasked our legislative subcommittee and our best practices committee to first and foremost understand what just happened here, thoroughly analyze these changes. And then the best practices committee, once we understood what was happening, we've come together to figure out how to best implement these reforms into our everyday practice. The result of what you have seen in our budget proposal is rooted in that deliberative process. Just 2 weeks ago here in the city of Albany, we hosted all 62 offices to exchange ideas and continue to flesh out where it is that we can make improvements and do it in a very responsible way. I just want to say that what has transpired on April 1st, one could say was reform, but I would argue that it's a reimagination. Okay? And so let me first explain what is happening with bail. From this point forward, anyone who is charged with a misdemeanor offense or a violation or a Class E felony that is outside of a sexual act or outside of a domestic violence act, that individual is no longer to be arrested and held overnight. That individual is to be given an appearance ticket. So as your misdemeanor courts work in your communities, whether it's Guilderland, whether it's Green Island, or in Albany, gone are the days when arraignments would take place in the morning and the process of the day would continue to go accordingly. As a result of bail reform, every county is now required to create pretrial services so that the numbers of every defendant or emails of every defendant is printed on an appearance ticket, and if they fail to show, in the past there would have been bench warrants issued. Now what's required is that that individual, that information is sent to a pretrial service, which I'm assuming here is probation. We have not yet gotten clarification. And then probation is supposed to contact that individual to remind that individual that they are supposed to appear in court. So in terms of bail, it's changing our conversation with our victims of crime. People who expect a person who's offended them or assaulted them would expect that they wouldn't see that person in the neighborhood again, except that's just not going to happen. That person is going to be out. Along those lines, this year we experienced Raise the Age by adding the 17-year-olds to the docket that now is at family court. Now I know that before the passage of this legislation, it was thought that the district attorney's office would have less involvement in family court because of Raise the Age. That has not happened, ladies and gentlemen. As a matter of fact, 80% of our shootings that we're experiencing in the city of Albany happen to involve young people between the ages of 12 and 17. And those are the cases that we are still responsible for prosecuting. So now we have a share of our staff that is actually physically at family court handling these cases with no additional funding for these positions. The area that I want to focus the vast majority of my time with you in here is discovery. The discovery legislation that was passed, Article 245, places a massive burden on our process. And here's the reason why. Today, any case that appears in Albany County is a case where we practice open discovery, meaning information from the police that I have, I turn over to defense attorneys. Defense attorneys can have good educated conversations with their clients. We convey an offer. That offer is accepted. Case is closed. So discovery, full discovery, we only do on 1% of our cases. 1. And those are the cases that actually go to trial. So if there is a crash, if there is a homicide, any of those cases, the lab results, the construction documents, the reconstruction documents, all those things are turned over, and we turn them over to defense counsel because that's full discovery and we're at trial. The new state law requires that every case in your court, including vehicle and traffic cases, we must complete discovery before we can even convey an offer. 90+% of our cases in Albany County, we resolve within the first 20 to 30 days. Because as experienced prosecutors, we look at a case, we speak to our victims, you can evaluate your evidence, and we convey an offer that is fair. That offer is usually rooted in this one principle. As a defense attorney, you're not making me do all of this work, getting all of these labs and everything else. They'll agree to accept an offer, and my offer is lower than what I could get in exchange for that person not having to put me through this process. Well, that entire mechanism is now gone. And so, the budget that we propose to you today, with the number of asks that we have made, is based on our best assessment
of what it will require for us to achieve our goal of maintaining public safety in Albany County. I can tell you right now emphatically that the executive's budget that granted us 6 positions, only one of which was an attorney, that is completely inappropriate, not appropriate for what challenges lay ahead of us. I've come to this group, like I said, for 15 years. And over the years, if you do an analysis of what I've asked for, the vast majority of my asks have been status quo budgets, with the exception of when we're able to achieve a grant, and then we're adding a body that is on a grant-filled position. This is really the first time that I've found myself asking this august body for an investment in the DA's office beyond the grants that are available to us. I'm beyond the point of debating the merits of the reforms that were passed. We did that prior to it being passed. From April 1st, my organization, along with every DA's office in the state of New York, we have been trying to figure out how to implement successfully the laws that have been passed by our state legislatures. And so, as we share in all of the successes that we've experienced over the course of the last 15 years, we will too have to share in the burden of making sure that Albany County is within compliance of the new statute. And I'll be very brief in saying that I've also had the opportunity to review all of the other agencies that fall within the criminal justice continuum. And for example, your pretrial service agency is probation. And there's not one new body for probation. We have about 7,500 filings every year in Albany County. And that doesn't count the vehicle and traffic matters that are very precious to your local jurisdictions. If those people don't show, it's up to the pretrial service agency to reach out to those people to make sure that they are showing. And I have not seen any kind of modification in their budget to reflect this new burden that they're going to be experiencing. And so I want to say that this is the beginning of our conversation, because we need to have a lot more dialogue about what is happening. I would take my hat off to a guy, and I hate doing this because I hate complimenting him in public, but County Sheriff Craig Apple provided an incredible resource to us in the form of technology that we believe will lighten the burden for us. And I appreciate that, Craig. But what it won't do is address the workflow challenges that we have. And workflow challenge can only be addressed by having people who are actually handling the work. With that, I'll take your questions.
All right, I'll entertain questions from the members. Mr. Grimm.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Can you clarify, I'm still unclear about bail reform, who gets arrested and put in jail and who doesn't? Can you explain that to me, Dick?
Under the new reform, it's presumptive release, meaning that just about every offense that we have in the misdemeanor world, a person is issued an appearance ticket, and then there's a date that they're given for them to appear, right? So gone are the days. For example, let me give you this example. You live in the first floor with your wife, and your neighbor lives in the second floor. If you get into a domestic violence incident with your wife, the police will come over and they will arrest you, because domestic violence is still one of those cases that it's proper to arrest somebody. But if you get into a fight with a person on the second floor or the first floor of your house, that's not a domestic relation, that person is issued an appearance ticket, which means that you get to run into that person in the hallway. That's what bail reform means. Now, if that person fails to show on the date of that appearance ticket, that person is not going to get a bench warrant issued by a judge. The judge is going to transmit that person's information to probation, and probation is supposed to either text that person, call that person, or mail that person to get that person back to court.
So violent people are not getting put in jail, is what you're telling me? Because an assault, that's violence.
It's a violent assault as we speak about it across the table. It's not defined as a violent assault in the penal law. So murderers still will be arrested. Rapists will still be arrested. People who commit domestic violence will still be arrested. The people who will not be arrested are the people who burglarize your home and the people who rob you.
I could catch somebody stealing my television set out of my house, and he'd be on the street the next day?
You would call the police?
Same day, a couple hours later.
Okay, all right. I appreciate your frustration, which I share. Go ahead.
And just to heighten the example, say you live in an apartment complex and he burglarizes your house, steals your TV, not only is he back the next hour, but he's like living right next door.
And I can't say, why haven't you arrested this guy? And you say the law now requires he be given a ticket, just like he was going 40 in a 30 zone.
Right. Although he'd actually be arrested, but upon arraignment, he'd be presumptively released.
Well, but these people aren't going to show up, a lot of these folks, are they?
Which begs a question that is not answered in any of the, it's not answered in the CPL. Is your county sheriff going to be the person or the agency that goes out to pick up people on bench warrants? Or is that going to be something that's also leveled on the police department or on the district attorney's office? It's silent. So there'll be bench warrants issued. I mean, right now, as we sit here now, we have cases where individuals are in Kansas and they have DWIs. I have to do a cost-benefit analysis of whether or not I'm going to spend a few $1,000s sending two people to go pick up a person for a misdemeanor or a DWI, could be a felony. But I make those decisions all the time. We generally do not do that unless it's a violent crime.
And on the burglary example again, not only is that guy released, but within 15 days of his arraignment on the felony complaint, he's going to get all of your contact information, all of your wife's contact information, and all of your children's contact information.
All of the witness.
Every witness that has any knowledge about it.
Nobody in Albany thought of this when they were passing this law?
They did. They didn't.
Well,
they thought about it, made a judgment, but that's what should
But they didn't
happen.
ask us.
Is our
They wouldn't
community,
let us talk.
I understand.
this is my question, it's an important one, Mr. Soares. Is our community less safe because of this legislation?
I think people are less safe because of this legislation. I think that it went extremely overboard. And I will say this, the communities that will experience the greatest impact are going to be communities of color where the victims and the offenders oftentimes live in the very same community. And so I anticipate witness intimidation. We see that now. But I anticipate witness intimidation. I anticipate cases being dismissed for lack of cooperation. And those metrics are easily measured by the Division of Criminal Justice Services. My plan is to develop a report every quarter and continue to submit those reports to our state legislatures until they take some action.
okay, can I just ask one thing? That we remember that we're talking about the budget. And although we may find this very interesting, it might take them a little bit longer to explain this to us because we are not attorneys and we're only late.
Yeah.
All right, so let's continue to speak to the budget.
I've got some budget questions, if I could then.
Okay, I want to answer. I'm just
Okay.
entertain Mr. Bergdorf right now.
I'd just like to, you talked about bail. Kind of interested in the expedited discovery. 15 days from the date of arrest or the date of?
The date of arraignment.
The date of arraignment.
So if a person is arraigned on January 1st, I have until...
How does that work with an appearance ticket, or it doesn't count there?
It does count. An appearance ticket, a person, for example, if you're issued an appearance ticket, and let's say this is January 1st, that officer has 20 days. He can write that ticket out to January 20th. That will be your arraignment day, January 20th. That is your first appearance. So what happens is that officer has to turn over that paperwork to the court within 24 hours, his paperwork. The defendant then appears on January 20th, and when that defendant appears on January 20th, I will have 15 days from the 20th to turn everything over to that defendant. And here's the reason why that's not possible. It's not possible because some of you here are familiar you've read in the paper, you've seen in the news, there was an incident on First Street where an officer struck a young man when they were pulling these young people from a party. That was one incident that was played on television, and you've seen it in the TU. Except that to review all of those body cams, to review all of the dash cams, it took one of our more seasoned prosecutors 24 hours to review all of that material. And our obligation isn't just to review, our obligation is to also redact. So if there is a minor in the room, if there is a person who just happens to be walking by, we have to redact that information before we can turn it over. A lot of the asks within this budget are for those people who can actually handle, we're calling them discovery compliance officer. We're using them as our air traffic control between the law enforcement agencies and the defense bar that they have to turn materials over to.
Are you getting any guidance?
Mr. Bergdorf?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay, I really want to keep this to the budget.
Well, this
Wait,
is the budget.
Let me finish. So, I did get, what you're saying, but you just came up with a different title here. I didn't see that. What did you just call it?
Discovery compliance officer.
Is that in here?
The attorneys would be our discovery, the attorneys that are proposed in the budget would be those compliance officers within each unit in our felony units and our local courts.
And I think that's the kind of information that I'm trying to extract so that people would know how the budget is impacted by these new positions. And that would be these people. Is that what I'm understanding?
Yes.
Okay, so that's all I'm asking, that we get to that. Again, your explanation, it's a little bit longer because we're not attorneys. But the end of what you just explained was how that affects the budget and the new positions that you would like to have, because these new positions would then become
The discovery compliance officers.
the discovery compliance officers. That's all I'm asking, so that we do get to that. Mr. Ward.
I'm outside the committee, as long as the committee's all set. Will these discovery compliance officers assist local police departments?
Yes,
Because
they
it's
will.
going to be a huge burden on them to produce the evidence.
The way I liken it is to think about a supermarket. The police have a variety of different databases and different sources where they produce their evidence material. And so the police now are required within 7.5 days to do their shopping, take everything, put it in one basket, and go to the checkout lane. The checkout lane, we're using that example as the fiber network that the sheriff is graciously allowing us to use. They will be able to launch that information to us with that fiber network. There has to be someone on the other side that takes all of that information, can watch the videos, can parse out what is important, and then send it off to whoever it is that, whatever defense attorney we have to turn it over to.
Are body cams going to be mandatory?
Body cams, every county, every police department now is getting ready to go online with their body cams. We've had Colony that's had a number of them turned on. I think they're still in the testing phase. Albany is fully implemented. Guilderland, I believe, is in the process of going full-blown body cam. Our greater challenge, however, is the New York State Police as an entire agency with body cam, and what that means to traffic tickets that happen in smaller towns.
Is there grants to pay for these mandated body cams?
I'm going to be appearing before the Senate on October 28th, engaging with them in an effort to see if there's resources that can be extracted to help us achieve our goal. I appreciate your help. I believe it was last month that we had come in here moving resources around in anticipation of 2/20 of January 20th.
Yeah, with that said, I have several questions. So, one of the questions that I have, is it necessary to have all these positions on January 1st?
Here is the...
And with that, I'll do too. Where are you going to put all of them?
That's our challenge, right? So is it necessary to have all of these positions on January 1st? We don't believe that we'll have all these positions on January 1st, even if you granted them, because we still have to go through the interviewing process and attracting candidates. So what we would want to be in a position of doing is beginning that hiring right now and having that money in the budget January 1st. If there is an accommodation that the legislature is seeking in terms of agreeing to, let's say, a 50% of the ask for period January to, let's say, June, giving it a period of time in order to see how things work, I would be more than happy to report to you monthly. And then work to phase in phase 2 from July to December.
And just a quick on workflow. An employee has, 1,080 hours in their entire work year, right? So if you take each case and you say there's going to be a minimum of 1 hour review for each case, there's just literally not enough employees to do the work that we currently have. And so what we've done is looked at some of the the state standards for defense attorneys that were put out based on the Hurrell decision. And there's minimum annual assignments in terms of caseload and hours per case, minimum hours that attorneys are supposed to be spending on each case. If we were to, I have these numbers and I can give them to you, but if you apply those standards to our office in terms of the current open cases in the County of Albany, we need 69 attorneys based on a maximum annual case assignment. And we need, based on hours in that same assessment, we would need 61 attorneys. That's just to handle the current caseloads that we have. And additionally, if you look at the criminal justice continuum, as the DA spoke about earlier, if you compare our office to the public defender, the alternate public defender, and 18B, as well as indigent defense, what you'll see for 2019 in terms of staffing is that those agencies have a total of 56 attorneys. Our office has a total of 38 attorneys. They handle indigent defense. We handle indigent prosecution as well as private prosecution. The total staff for those agencies in 2019 is 76, and our total staff is 68. So right now, the indigent defense system has more resources in terms of bodies than prosecution in Albany County. And if the 2020 budget goes into effect as it is in the proposed budget, the total number of staff would go up to 92 for indigent defense, and we would be at 77. So it further creates inequities within the system when we have every single case to prosecute and the burden, and the indigent defense doesn't have as many cases, and it's their job to react.
So it appears that you want to increase the staff just about 50%.
Correct.
Than what you have right now. There's another thing too. I think we just approved something Tuesday night.
Yes.
Okay, but I still see the budget still requests $50,000 for some computer.
Correct, because we know that what we were able to do is upgrading the 911 system fiber network. So that includes switches, that includes servers, that includes firewalls. We know that moving forward in next year, there will be additional charges. We will need new scanners. We will need new computers. The amount of data, we might even need more storage because the amount of data that we're going to be getting and transmitting is immense.
All right, so, but I also noticed there's a significant increase in overtime. So if you're hiring more people, it's as if you're saying that you're still going to need more overtime even with your requests. So, are you expecting the new personnel to also work overtime?
So here's the quick and easy response to that. Overtime in our office only works if you have a victim of crime that walks into your door who is reporting a crime and you have to relocate them. We send our investigators all throughout the Capital District in witness protection. The dollar value that you see there is a reflection of what we anticipate to be the additional moving of people given the bail statute that has just been passed.
Are there any other questions? Yes, Mr. Grimm?
Thank you, Madam Chair. You did a great job of expressing frustration, and I agree with it, that the Azores, but I don't think, I count 35 new positions.
Yes.
I don't think that's realistic. I mean, that's almost like creating a whole nother agency, especially when you've had these discussions with the county executive, and he felt 6 new positions would make it work.
There is no one.
Is that a fair characterization? Or?
There is no one in this county, be it government or elsewhere, that is a subject matter expert on this reform more so than the person that's talking to you right now. There's only one person in this room that can evaluate, assess the system that I function in, establish efficiencies within that system, and no one from the county executive's office could begin to understand those issues. Now, what I will say this, in looking at the continuum of the criminal justice system, it appears to me that they have fully prepared the public defender's office and the indigent defense system for the challenges of 2020. But again, if you look at the continuum of the system, there's the first responder, there's the sheriff, then there's the prosecutor, then there's the court, and only after arraignment do we have an assignment to a defense attorney. So if you gum up the first and the second phases of that process, you can anticipate that there's going to be dysfunction all throughout that continuum. So when you say, yes, you need newer people, that is because when you're accustomed to doing discovery on 1% of your cases, and those are the cases that go to trial, but you've just been handed a law that says you must now do discovery on everything, well, that means we need all hands on deck, more hands on deck, in order to achieve that goal.
But the probation department, you mentioned that they're going to have an added burden, and they've said that they're going to try to manage it with their current staff.
And I will bet you dinner anywhere you want that let me just explain a little thing before we leave. Look, probation and family court, Raise the Age has made them now the 2 agencies responsible for some of the most dangerous people that we have in our community. Like I said, there's a shooting that occurs just about every single week in the city of Albany. More often than not, it's a young person being arraigned and being sent to family court. With probation's newest responsibility of having to monitor young people in ankle bracelets, and the family court basically having individuals with their, I'm saying staff, that are not accustomed to handling violent crimes. So the entire system has shifted, and come January 2020, we can anticipate a lot more shifting. And we have a burden, and it has to be a shared burden.
Well, an additional thing that falls to probation, we were talking about whether violent offenders are going to be held in. They're eligible to be held in. They have to be, however, we have to use the least restrictive non-monetary condition to ensure that they return to court. There's no safety element to it. So what you would most likely be getting in those circumstances is someone who's ordered to wear an ankle bracelet. We're not going to have enough ankle bracelets for all the guys that we're going to have running around free as a result of the new bail law.
But what are the other DAs
Mr.
doing?
Grimm, I'd like to recognize Mr. O'Brien, please.
Thank you. Since we're on new ground here on this this whole reforms, would you be willing to do some sort of a contingency and then come to the legislature on a monthly basis? And
I absolutely would like to work with this legislative body. There's metrics, there's, we could even bring cases as examples. Whichever subcommittee you'd like for me to meet with and my staff, we would definitely do that.
I think it's something with law, combined with law and audit and finance, we could work with you, and we want to work with you. And
The one,
right now-
the
right
one
now-
caveat to a contingency is that January 1st, no one really in the criminal justice system knows what's going to happen.
Yes.
And if we are kind of boxed in by we can only have this right now, we might need to shift. Do I think we're going to have all these new positions filled on January 1st? Absolutely not. And plus, we've already gotten 2 by grant funding, just so you'll know, so we're only looking for 33 now. But
Now we're getting there.
Right, that's something. But at the end of the day, if we have to wait until the middle of January to send you a new proposal, then that's going to be heard by the committee either the end of January, end of February, and then we're looking at, it passing beginning of February, March. We're already 2 months in, 3 months in before we can adapt. Whereas if we have the positions in our budget, then we can come back to you and adjust for do we need more attorneys? Do we need more support staff? Where's the need? But without that flexibility, we're kind of boxed in.
Well, I think the legislature is willing to work with you. It's just, this is all new to everyone here,
And right now, we're really not aware yet of how much, what the fiscal health really is. I just want to ask 2 more questions, and then I'll allow the other members to. Now, I noticed there's a specialty program. Special programs, $125,000, and there's also miscellaneous equipment of $42,000. Can you explain what they are?
So miscellaneous equipment would be, again, for servers or switches or firewalls that are needed to help the other agencies, the police departments, make sure that everything is secure moving forward. We had Albany, who had a huge ransomware attack. So it's dollars in the budget that we can utilize to ensure safety within the network that we're building, as well as ensure the integrity of the information that's coming in. And in terms of special projects, we anticipate that our witness and victim protection needs are going to increase dramatically. And NIPD is where we go now for those needs if they arise. We anticipate that those funds are going to dry up very quickly for the state because NIPD serves 62 counties with a very limited budget, and we anticipate that we're going to need to have housing paid for, and grand jury minutes are turned over within 15 days. So people are going to be scared. We have Facebook posts now with materials that we've given defense attorneys, attempting to intimidate witnesses. So with all of that information now available, with contact information, grand jury minutes, testimony within 15 days, we anticipate some serious protection needs.
So that's for the $42,000 miscellaneous?
That's for the special programs.
Oh, that's for the
Yes.
okay. And so the
449
$42,000?
Is for additional needs in terms of, do we need more storage? Do we need more, bandwidth that we need to purchase because the county bandwidth is too small to deal with the large number of documents that we're getting from all the departments?
Okay, I'd like to recognize Mr. Bergdorf, and I'd like to recognize your colleague, Mr. Miller, behind you, and then Mr. Ward. Thank you.
I realize, David, that you were the president of the District Attorneys Association and a very eloquent spokesperson for the association during these legislative discussions. How are your local colleagues, and when I say local, I know you're bigger than Schenectady, I know you're bigger than Rensselaer County, I know you're bigger than Saratoga County, but is there some information that you could give us that would show us how other district attorneys in terms of manpower and budget increases are attempting to deal with the same set of challenges, even though we realize that they may not be on the same magnitude?
Sure.
Because I think that would be, I know I would find that helpful in knowing that, maybe it's not 100% increase in attorneys, but there seems to be a mean based on caseload that is sort of being universally recognized as being the lowest common denominator.
Okay.
I think that's a very fair request, too, Mr. Bergdorf. Mr. Miller?
You mentioned earlier when you were talking about reforms, and there was a seizure reform also, but you didn't really get into that. Is that going to have any effect on the budget?
Well, the seizure reform is quite the interesting one out of the whole mix. It was never discussed and it just sprang up. The requirement now is that the people must prove preliminarily that the dollars associated with what we have found was the product of the illicit crime, where before you could, if you're a drug dealer, I could seize your bank accounts and then negotiate the forfeiture or the seizure of those resources. And that's the way that the law worked. Now, a drug dealer would be allowed to use those illicit proceeds to pay for an attorney, as well as to live off of those dollars. I know we talk about drug dealers oftentimes when we're talking about seizures, but it really hurts in the practice of when senior citizens are victims of crime and someone's stolen money from them, because the perpetrator can actually use those dollars to pay for an attorney, and there's no restitution for those people. So that's how it's going to impact on us. And it'll also require a greater asset forfeiture seizure practice within the office, because now we'll have the additional burden preliminarily of having to establish that those dollars are associated with the crime, where we didn't have to do that before.
Thank you.
Additionally,
Mr. Ward, please.
Well, as an aside to that, isn't the seizure program a federal program? Is it preempted by state law?
If it's, you can seize money both on the federal side as well as on the state side. So if you have a drug case that can be prosecuted federally, you opt to go federally, because then you're abiding by the federal seizure laws. If it's a case that is strictly rooted in state law, then that's when those laws we will make that decision carefully as we go forward, because that is just an undue burden for us to have to address that.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say that in terms of a budget impact,
Yes.
every one of our employees in the office has a laptop.
Mhm.
It's at a cost of, $2,500 a person when you're doing the Microsoft Office. The county has not paid 1 cent for those. They've all been purchased out of asset forfeiture. So we've relieved the burden of technology as well as vehicles for our investigators and a portion of our phones every year are paid for by asset forfeiture. So if asset forfeiture decreases, we still need those. We still need the vehicles to transport our victims, and we still need, computers that we can take into court so we can go green and we can, go paperless and do this project, and we can't without those dollars.
And that would be a general
Shifted.
fund expenditure.
Correct.
I guess my question was about the bill itself. Is there any possibility of a cleanup bill? And I know there's a lot of discussion about the merits of the different parts of it, but discovery without demand, to me, it seems like something can be moved there, because I think that's an undue burden in most cases.
It is interesting you say that, because we were just asked last week to meet with the governor's staff for the limited discussion of addressing discovery when it comes to vehicle and traffic tickets. And the reason why they did that is because they passed this legislation not recognizing that there's a ton of money that they're going to lose when these cases are dismissed, and these surcharges cannot be collected by the state. And so they are at least having these discussions where it benefits them.
So there is a possibility for movement on that issue.
The Assembly's never going to approve any substantive cleanup of this.
Well, I think we should be talking more Assembly people. I have. I've already talked to my representatives. This is a big issue for everybody. Local, county, and state.
I want to wind this up.
Thank you.
I really want to thank you for giving an excellent presentation here. So if there are no other questions, we're going to move to the sheriff, but if you can address Mr. Bergdorf's request, that would be excellent for the whole body.
Will do. And thank you very much. Thank you for your time and your patience.
On that.
Okay,
I've seen it,
again,
it doesn't work.
we want to come back to order. All right, we are now going to entertain the sheriff. Craig Apple.
We're gonna dance and sing.
Big Danny turned the AC on.
Good?
Yes, you did.
All right, thank you for the invite, like I had a choice. I'd like to just, everybody's been sitting here for a couple of hours, so, and rather than a huge opening statement, I'm just gonna go through some of our budget highlights.
Good.
And then we'll take, you can fire away at me. First of all, we reduced our medical care at the correctional facility by $800,000 as a result in some of the reduction in boarders and the general population. As a result of that as well, we reduced our food costs at the jail $75,000. The electric and gas at the facility is going down $75,000 due to us closing our tiers, shutting our tiers down, not decommissioning, but shutting down so we can reopen if there's a rise in the census. We're running with 58 vacant correction officers in 2020, which will yield a $4.6 million savings to the county as a result, again, in the general population and shifting our classification system around. We're reaping the benefits of last year's CAD system upgrades, which we were now able to reduce our CAD system costs by $250,000 a year. We initiated a new automobile lease program. As a result, it will lower our cost by $100,000 a year. We were approved for 6 new state and federal grants, adding $1.6 million in revenue. There was an overwhelming response to our civilian response to active shooter due to a lot of the cowardly acts going on in this country. We've trained roughly over 1,000 people so far, and we anticipate doubling that in 2020, paid for with seizure funds. We have the largest upstate Operation Lifesaver, which is a program that we started a few years back for those who have a propensity to wander with autism or dementia. We pay for that with asset seizure funds. It's the actual largest in the state of New York at this point. We give our older cars to agencies in the county to prevent having to purchase them. We continue to monitor the county domestic violence hotline, so the 911 and the rape and crime victims, whichever unit Karen Ziegler runs, doesn't have to pay monitoring costs. Our EMS division is growing faster than expected, mainly due to a decrease in volunteerism. We've absorbed area rescue squads, and our call volume is increasing exponentially. Incidentally, this will also result in a boost in our revenue due to insurance billing. Our correctional facility continues to be on the cutting edge with many counties in the state and other states mirroring our veterans and treatment wings at the jail. Our inmate workforce continues to save thousands of dollars in communities by cleaning roadways, painting fire hydrants, and assisting a variety of non-for-profits. We've created a homeless housing wing at the facility, created with in-house labor to serve the impoverished and vulnerable population. Ultimately, we should save thousands of dollars and possibly millions of dollars once it's up and running and at full capacity, which would factor in Medicaid costs, housing costs, incarceration costs, prosecutorial costs, and probation costs. In addition to the aforementioned CAD savings at our 911 center, we're building a state-of-the-art center in the grounds of the nursing home. Once completed, this facility will have the capabilities to dispatch regionally. It's being built with shared services in mind, not consolidation. We would love for other municipalities to come in and utilize that facility, therefore saving everybody thousands of dollars in fiber and technology. Incidentally, that's the fiber that we will be turning on for the district attorney's office, hopefully saving them tens of thousands of dollars annually. Fire Coordinator's Office, following the state fiscal year of April to April, has already expended 2,000 training hours, so we've boosted and increased our county fire coordinators. And with annual calls for service increasing by 15 to 20%, we're striving to continue to be a premier law enforcement agency while keeping our costs at a minimum. We have become the only sheriff's office in the state of New York that serves EMS, fire, 911, law enforcement, corrections, and emergency management. Therefore, we pretty much are a unicorn here. Basically, working with management and budget, the county exec's office, we're between revenue and savings, we're cutting off $9 million. I want to commend Sean Thalen and Dave Riley from the management and budget. We work tirelessly with them, and as well as my staff here with me present tonight. We've been working for several months, and I think that we present a very robust budget, but yet a very efficient budget. We have roughly $3.2 million in revenue, $4.6 million in vacant positions, $800,000 in medical, $250 in CAD, $100 in vehicles, $75 in food, and it totals up to just below $9 million. Our point ones, which are salaries, are roughly 2%. Our point twos are down 21%. Our point fours are down 1.59%. Our 8%, which is the benefits, I really can't control that, at 2.9%, which really is not out of the possibility. And our revenue is down by $3 million, which is expected, because for years and years and years, the county ran its budget based on border revenue at the jail. And that's kind of like building a house on sand. Sooner or later, it's going to erode. And we're pretty much at that with a lower census, with decriminalizing many things throughout the state, with bail reform, discovery, you name it, that's where we're at. The census is down.
All right, I'm just going to start with couple of questions, and I'm going to open it up to the rest of the members. Now, as far as the 911, so where do you stand on the proposed move to Colony right now?
We're moving forward. I'm actually, as I sit here at the table, just awaiting the executive's office to sign off on a rendered drawing, which should be done hopefully by tomorrow. And we're ready to send things to bid. We're still looking for some engineering on the inside. We've got a scaled-down building, but a very, I think, an efficient and proficient building that, again, will allow for regional dispatching. It'll allow for every municipality in this county to work out of that building. I'm not saying they're going to, but I would like to see them do that because we can do more with numbers, power and numbers. Rather than feed Colony fiber and Gilderland fiber and Albany fiber and technology, have it in-house, have everybody in there. They can still dispatch for themselves, for their own agencies, but then you know what, when the city of Albany is burdened with a homicide and a Signal 30 fire, maybe at that point a few guys can shift their chairs over to assist them, where now calls could go unanswered because dispatchers are tied up. So it's a concept, I'm not saying anyone's going to do it, but I think it's something that we need to look forward and we need to be prepared to do it. Where the current building, there's no room for us to expand.
All right, now, given the population now out at the jail, can you give us what the current census number is and how is staffing, how do you see it affected by 10 years ago as to, how it is right now?
Well, 10 years ago, I was running around 900 a day, somewhere around that. Today, we're about 480. Of the 480, I'd have to say, this is just a guesstimate, but roughly 105 of them are not ours. I think at last count, 65 of those were federal, and the remaining 40 were split between Greene County and Schoharie County. We are their local correctional facilities right now. That will come to an end probably at some point in 2020. Greene County is being very aggressive with building a jail at $70 million for 40 inmates. And Schoharie is building a jail for 20 inmates.
I'd like to open it up right now to the members. Any questions? Mr. Byrne?
Thank you, Madam Chair. You went through a lot of stuff, Sheriff, so if I missed it, I'm sorry. But now that we're putting fewer criminals in jail, basically what we just heard from the DA, how will that affect your revenue? Or how will it affect what you'll need to watch the people that you have in there?
As I mentioned, Mr. Graham, we're cutting costs drastically, like $800,000 in medical, $75,000 in food. We're shutting tiers down, $75,000 in gas and electric, because we won't have to run those tiers based on the numbers that we were projecting for 2020. I don't see any massive spikes coming. In fact, in January 1, I'm not sure how it works out. Like January 1, we let our misdemeanors go, or they go down to court, or how that process is going to happen. So we're figuring around March, I could lose, as of yesterday, 56 additional. So those would be individuals that are in there right now on misdemeanors that fit within the new categorized crimes that the governor has said that there'll be no more bail on, and it'll be a presumptive release. So I think, based on today at 480, I mean, that drops me immediately to 430. So I think our census is going to continue to decline at a slow pace. Then it's my opinion that when folks don't go to court, period, and they test the system, I think there's going to be a swell of warrant arrests eventually, and I think we might see a spike in our census, but nothing that's going to, break us.
Now, you provide EMS services to some of the towns that can't really do it on their own.
Yes.
Is that a big revenue source that can potentially grow?
Well, it's interesting with that. We've provided part-time paramedics and EMTs for a number of years, pretty much since the inception of the program. I think that's a very inefficient and almost unsafe way to operate, so this year we're switching to a full-time model. With that said, we have consumed Mooresville Rescue. We're talking to Westerlo Rescue right now. There's other rescue squads that are hanging on by a thread just trying to do it, and I hope they make it. I mean, we need volunteers in this country, in this county, and I hope they make it. I just don't have much excitement there and optimism that they will. So our program is probably going to continue to grow. I'm hoping to partner with the volunteers and have them augment our staff and hopefully hire them. But I think the direct answer is yes. I think our revenue recovery is going to grow. We've added an additional, close to $100,000 for next year? 70.
Isn't it more fiscally sound for you to do a chair for the small towns rather than them having their own and are relying on part-timers, which really is problematic? We saw that in Gilliland. They did away with it. I mean, it's too much, the response time is too important.
The response time is too important, and besides that, the problem that we have, Mark, when people work part-time, they're working 24 hours for the sheriff's office today. They're leaving us at 7 a.m., and they're going to Greenport and working 24 hours. And they're leaving them, and then they're going down to Ravina and working 24 hours. And, you know, listen, if there's no calls, and maybe they can close their eyes for a few minutes, everything will be well. But if they're busy and they're humping calls for 24, 48 hours, something's going to happen. And I think we owe it to the residents of this county to provide them the most robust system that we can. And by switching to a full-time paramedic and EMT program, I think we're doing that. And I know it looks like there's a bunch of new positions there, but in actuality, those EMTs and paramedics are being filled with 2 other lines that have been reduced. We've taken the money out of other lines and moved them over to individual line items instead of having a pot of money and having it drawn out each day with a 24-hour shift from a part-time.
Will the homeless idea that you have, will that be a revenue source?
I think ultimately, yes. Listen, I don't expect to open the doors tomorrow and make money, but what I'm trying to explain to people is that in this county, in our hospitals, we have homeless individuals going into the ER multiple times a night, especially when it's colder out, tying up nurses, tying up beds, tying up doctors, racking up Medicaid costs. And then they get released and they wander around and they come back. So our hopes are that once they're cleared in the emergency room, they will be transported by the hospital up to the shelter, and they can stay there. Now, we know that they're sustainable for the night, and then our hopes are in the morning, we can work with them and get them on some sort of programming, whether it be mental health, whether it be opioid addiction counseling, treatment counseling, whatever the case may be. All in all, these costs are going to save tens of thousands, possibly millions of dollars in medical costs, tying up doctors, and as well as the county pays a lot of area hotel rooms to house these individuals. This is not a bad idea. This is an idea to help our most vulnerable and take dead space and turn it into something positive. And we've been able to turn people around that looked at it and went, oh my God, you're assimilating homelessness and incarceration. No, we're not. We're trying to help people, and I think in government, that's what we're supposed to be doing, and we want to prove that here in Albany County.
Medicaid, our biggest bill is Medicaid,
Yes.
$67 million bill,
Right.
right-handed. That may not save your budget, but it's certainly, the Medicaid cost for homeless is astronomical. They go to the emergency room.
And it increases constantly. They were saying that it's not unreasonable for some of these individuals to go in there 7 times a night. I mean, there's no free visits to the hospital.
Oh, yeah.
So, I think, look, I don't know how to quantify it at this point. We've got to take some baby steps, but I'm telling you, it's a program that I think is going to take off, and it's clean, safe, healthy living there as well.
Thank you, Sheriff.
Okay, I want
Thank
to
you,
thank you. Before I call on Ms. Plotsky, can you just do one thing for me? Can you please explain the changes proposed in senior staffing?
The executive undersheriff and the undersheriff?
Yes.
Okay. In the budget, it looks like these are additions. What they are basically is I took a chief deputy position and I took the current undersheriff position and adjusted their salaries to create an executive undersheriff. There's an adjustment there. I'm not sure exactly what the percentage is. I think it's like $12,000 or $13,000 for both positions. Reason being, as the DA started to touch on, we're dealing with a lot of new issues. First of all, we are the only sheriff's office that has all the disciplines of public safety. I am your fire coordinator, I am your 911 coordinator, I'm your stop DWI coordinator, I'm your emergency manager, we run the ambulances, and of course we run the jail and we have law enforcement. We handle it all in the county. We're not paying other individuals to do this. We have a lot of oversight. We have a lot of new restrictions. We have a lot of new federal guidelines. We have bail reform. We have discovery. We have, we're working now on centralized arraignments. We have raised the age. We have oversight of the juvenile facility. I never had oversight of the juvenile facility. And I need people that I can trust to manage this while I'm out of the office and doing whatever. And the undersheriff will act on my behalf in that place.
Ms. Plotsky?
Hi, Sheriff.
Hi.
Thanks for you. So the new items for paramedics, expanding the programs to help cover hill towns, New Scotland, whatever other towns that
Yeah.
covering with those. If we approve these, does that mean that those will not get charged back to the towns?
No, they will. They do now. So right now, there's a pot of money for EMTs and there's a pot of money for the paramedics, okay?
Okay.
So bear with me here one quick second. So what we added were 10 paramedics and 7 EMTs. The paramedics, 429, 440, the EMTs, 198, 254. We've actually reduced the paramedic line, which used to be 697, the total amount for them, to 627, and boosted up the revenue recovery. There's actually a savings there for the county. It's a little bit deceiving when you see all these new positions, like, oh my God, what's he doing? But in actuality, there's about a $60,000, $70,000 savings there to the county, because with the increased personnel, we'll be able to handle more calls, which will result in raising our revenue recovery.
So I have
But that money does get billed back to the towns.
And I'm hoping for the county to absorb that cost, actually, because the towns are going from a volunteer service to now paying the county, and they really can't afford that type of an increase. So that's what I'm curious about, how to effectuate that and relieve the towns from that, what the county has now picked up.
I'm not going to disagree with you, ma'am, but I also think that there needs to be some accountability on both parts, right? EMS has been like the stepchild of public safety for years. There's no law mandating EMS. Many of these towns could go away with EMS, and we owe it to these folks to be able to pick it up, and that's what we started. And sure as anything, one of the local squads went down, and we were there. We rolled right in with our rigs. It was seamless, and we're prepared to continue to do that. We have great staff. I have great commanders that run that unit. We just received a statewide award, and I'm heading to Buffalo next week to receive a larger award for our program. With that said, I don't think it should be on the burden of the county taxpayers to be responsible to pay EMS for just Queens or just Guilderland. When they're already paying for EMS in Guilderland, or in Guilderland and in the town of Colony. So I think this, ultimately, a tax district for those areas should be created and used in that form, as opposed, and just charge those towns. I don't think, as a resident of Colony or a resident of the city of Albany, they have to be on the hook for the Hilltown's EMS or Queens EMS or Bethlehem's EMS for that matter.
So the tax district idea could.
I think the tax district would work and just charge those people, and those monies would cover that for those towns. And if it expands, it expands.
And those towns are also getting private insurance.
Correct.
Well, that was the question I was going to raise. I mean, we went through this in Colony, where we took over all the private volunteer organizations, and it was very costly in the beginning until somebody put their hand up and said, you know, we should be billing everybody's insurance carrier.
Which they do.
At which point in time, they did. Now, I assume do you do that?
Yes.
So you actually do the billing, or if you run a ambulance out in Clarkstown, somebody has health insurance, there is some compensation that comes in.
If we cover the town of Colony for a day,
yeah,
that person's getting charged.
Yeah.
Now, we don't, Medicaid only pays a small amount, but it's something. But if they have private insurance, it's usually a decent dollar that comes back, and we roll it into the system. When this was created, the idea was to lower the burden on the towns. We do give some money back to the towns each year. It's not a lot, because we have to save some money to, a stretcher's $40,000, an AED. We bought everybody AEDs in the county last year. Ambulances, $100,000. So we try to save 10 to 15% each year, put it aside in almost like a trust. So every 4 or 5 years, we can replace an ambulance. What's our revenue recovery this year?
325,000.
325.
Mr. Miller.
Sheriff, I'd like to ask you the same question I asked the district attorney. The seizure reform, does that impact your budget, and if so, how?
It will impact my budget. I don't think to the level of the district attorney, because the district attorney is dealing just about, I think, solely with state seizure, probably. Probably 90%, I'm just a guesstimate, but I'm dealing largely with federal seizure and lesser value of state seizure. Reason being is that when you seize things on a federal level, you get more of the money back into your coffers. On a state level, the DA gets a chunk, OASIS gets a chunk. By the time you're done, you're talking probably 35 to 40% of every dollar. So yes, it will impact. We buy our cars. The majority of our undercover cars are with seized assets. A lot of our phones are paid for with seized assets, computers. I buy the Village of Green Island, I buy the town of Queens. I'm right now helping the city of Waterloo with $30,000 in computer equipment. We try to spread the wealth and help the agencies that are really suffering out there.
Need some body cams.
I have no more money.
Just found that out tonight.
Our body cameras are up and running, and I'll tell you, it's the best thing we ever did.
Well, this is the second phase for Green Island, because we had the dash cams, and then they cycled out.
Green Island's always a cutting edge.
We don't have
It's a tough mile.
0.7.
Are there any other questions from the members? Well, I'll raise one. Let's talk about the increase.
You had to go there.
Well, I knew we were going to.
So it's a 16% increase I'm asking for. Adjust my salary from roughly 129 to 149. As you know, as an elected official, this is the only time that I can do it. I think that we have been very efficient and proficient over the years with our budget. We've helped the county, we've helped every agency, we've helped outside agencies from the county. We've created programs like there's none others. And I'm not saying that it's just because we deserve it like that. I think that with the responsibility that we have, that salary is commensurate with the duties that we're managing on a day-to-day basis. And with that, I think that our command staff, I mean, there are some small adjustments, but we only really have one new position in this budget. There's only really one, and it's the Deputy Director of Emergency Management. And with that said, that's a young individual who recently graduated Homeland Security School from UAlbany. He interned with us, and he's a valuable resource and could be a huge asset to this county. So I'm trying desperately to keep him in our employ. So we asked for that position to hire this young individual. As I sit here at this table, they are already out in Clarksville preparing for the storm. Now, I don't know if you know what's going on outside, but it's a small monsoon with 1 to up to 4 inches of rain, with 15 to 25 mile an hour winds with 45 mile an hour gusts. I've already been dealing with the mayor while I was out in the hallway, and we're preparing because of flooding and some of the things that have happened in the Normanskill over the years. We're working hard for you, I can promise you that, and I wouldn't ask for something if I didn't think that my staff or I was deserving of it.
Are there any other questions? Well, it seems as if you've answered everyone's questions.
Thank you.
All right, and thank you for coming.
So much material.
I think they do the book and they fix it up in there.
Why not? Try.
Thank you.
EMS stuff in your town,
See you tomorrow.
they're getting money now, from private insurance and Medicaid. So that money that would go, that goes to insurance, because you wouldn't be doing the service anymore. So it's not all volunteer.
We, it's like, well, off camera.
Okay.
I'm getting picked up.
Too much standing.
We're not that.
Stand for too long, it seems like.
That's the budget. Oh, good, let's rip this guy to pieces.
Good evening, Mr. Bailey.
How are you doing, Mr. Madam Chairwoman?
Are you ready?
I think so. It's been a nice, long night. I really appreciate the sheriff. I thought he was gonna hang out for the rest of the meeting, so it's been such a good time. It was very nice words of him. And it's been a pleasure over the last 4 years for myself to prepare a proposed budget that we all can sit here and talk about. The 7th straight year under the cap, and I feel that we've done a very responsible job and a good job during that time, and it's been my pleasure to be a part of that and working with my staff to give you a document that's worth, I think it's pretty good and worth at least a good informative debate on the items within. Without further ado, I have a little packet that I gave out, if you want me to just run through that real quick. It's nothing shocking in here. We do this every year, and I don't think there's anything too far out of the ordinary.
We'll go page by page. The first, the 2020 proposed revenue summary report. It's a comparison of 2015 through 2020. The biggest change, we have a $692 million worth of revenue this year. It's published on page 44 for an in-depth breakdown if you really are struggling to get to sleep tonight. It's $596.6 million in non-property tax revenue and a $95.3 million in property tax revenue. That's a proposed budget tax levy. In comparison from 2019 to the 2020 proposed, there's an increase of $20.5 million, about 3.1%. That's summarized on page 2. 3.08 if you want to be technical, down to the hundredth of the percent. Of this, 17.8 million is non-property tax revenue and an increase year over year. That's the 3.08, excuse me. It was 3.05 for the first number. And property tax revenue, which represents $2.67 million increase to the levy at 2.88%. Now, I'd like to just go through it like I do every year of how the tax levy formula works. It's a little convoluted because they like to call it the 2% tax cap. The real structure of it is it's 0 to 2%. The state does research and does a look at the CPI index, which is your consumer product index, and sees what costs are going up and makes a judgment if it's been less than 2%, which the tax cap would then be less than 2% in that regard, or greater. The maximum it can be is 2%. So if you had the cost of goods go up 5%, the state would hold it to that 2% for that factor. Now there's other factors and we'll go through them. The formula is on page 3. It's very intimidating, I think. It's one that you got to look through a few times to make sure you're hitting all the boxes right. Just to make sure. Page 4 has the tabulation of the last 5 years. The comparison for that is within that page, but the tax cap, as calculated, is $97,242,429. That is the number that you have to stay below for an override. A 50% majority is required, and you don't need an override to the tax cap, which is a good thing because most state programs now are being tied to the tax cap. Raise the age for one of the big ones for reimbursement to come through. You don't have to get a waiver from management and budget, the state management and budget. If you stay below that tax cap, they will reimburse you for your incremental costs that are associated with raise the age. That's part of the contractual obligation of that. And you see the departments that are affected by that: CYF, probation. I don't think law has any more because they denied that, but it's a couple $1 million, and you don't want to. You'd want to try to stay there as easy underneath that as much as you can. To this tax levy, there's certain chargebacks that are put onto the levy and towards Board of Election chargebacks, which I think, a couple $100,000 either way that nets out for the year. So there's also part of the levy that's the tax-based growth factor, and that increased from 0.83% to 0.9% from 2019 to 2020. And this is what the state, in its head, realizes as your real property growth value. That's what has been added in value to your tax base. The actual assessed value is more like 4%, and that's how we rate our tax rate, which we'll come up to and talk about in detail. But since the inflation for this year is over 2%, the tax cap growth, or the tax cap, allowable levy growth factor is 2% for this year. So with that and the $70,000 in extra pilots expected from Albany, because pilots have to get netted out of the formula the year they come on and then the year that they fall off, there's a opening year balance, closing year balance for any that are newly added. It's a way to stop municipalities from sticking everything into the pilot program, because they can take it off your levy tax rolls. That property is then removed from the levy tax rolls, and a fixed payment generally is due from that entity. So as we can see from on page 5, the tax levy limit is $97.2 million roughly. The proposed budget levy of $95.4 million roughly gives you a carryover of a little shy of 1.9 million, 1.879 million. A carryover happens every year that you don't come to the cap, but the carryover is the allowable amount of either 0.15% of your current year levy or the difference between your previous levy and your current levy, whichever is smaller. Very convoluted way of saying that this 1.8 million will be able to allow to carry 1.4 million of that over to next year. So we're not going into like our reserve cap part of the calculation. For the 6th straight year, as you can see from this, the proposed, along with all the adopteds here, the tax rate has decreased to 3.95% or dollars per 100,000 or per thousand of utilized assessed value, excuse me, to 3.512. A significant decrease over the last 6 years, and I think we've done a good job at doing that and keeping with that trend. I think it's good, responsible growth that has been captured here, along with the assessed value aspects of our county have grown. Now on to one of the biggest topics, and it's sales tax. That's on page 6. It's our largest revenue stream. You've heard this over and over again. We're forecasting $290.4 million for 2020. It's approximately $10 million or 3.5% increase over the 2019 number. I feel it's a conservative growth number. OSC earlier this year published about a 3.4% growth factor for this year, and was saying it was going to continue for at least the first half of next year. So I think with everything that shakes out, I think that it is a pretty good number. Aspects of that can be looked at is we don't have our 3rd quarter number in yet. It's due this week. And with that, and we'll pass it over when we have it completely available, they haven't withheld our AIM payments yet. I think everyone's aware of the AIM payment structure that municipalities within our borders that used to receive AIM funding, but less than 2% of their budget, that money was shifted from our sales tax to cover those towns and villages. By state statute, part of the executives, the governors enact the budget. With that being said, it's,
Question. Does that money come off the top for every resident of the county?
Yes, it comes right off the top.
So that if a local town or village loses, the rest of the county, ultimately the sales tax is subsidizing.
And there's no way to protect the formula distribution. So what it effectively entails, Mr. Bergdorf, as I think you were getting to, your distribution formula is changed for those towns and villages that fall under it, because effectively they're getting part of the other towns and villages and cities' sales tax. So yes, it is a shift.
And their 40%?
Yes, of their 40%. So
they're getting it.
That 1 million, we'll say, comes right off the top, right? Okay. And then your distribution is calculated 60-40, we'll say. But not all of your 40 are participating in that. So it is being shifted from that distribution from the haves to have-nots.
From the
have-nots to haves,
From the 40 or from the county share?
Well, ultimately, the 40, because it comes off the top. So 40% of that goes away, right?
So who is going to lose? Is it going to be the county budget or the towns and city budgets? Or both?
Both. We lose the $1 million off the top, so that's $400,000 in distribution that you're not gonna be putting in there.
And 600 for us.
Right, and 600 for us.
It also slightly skews the distribution percentage, kind of like Sean's saying, but right now we have it just based on population by the decennial census. This now skews that away from it.
Right. It's basically taken from because the city of Albany, if everybody was held true and didn't have this, the city of Albany would get more of that distribution. Because if its AIM payments because the AIM payments for the city of Albany continue through the state. Make sense? I can come back one more time. So it's a hard concept for me to get. Because it was like, watch this hand, and here's taking the $1 million from you.
That the simplicity of 60-40 based on population has now become a lot more complex.
Yes.
And there are going to be more winners and losers. And
I'll just send you over a basic spreadsheet that compares the two.
Keep punching, but it's not gonna happen.
That compares the two items. Yeah, but it skews the formula. What it does, because it's not built on the census anymore on that aspect that comes off the top. Regionally, unemployment, as you know, has been roughly 4% or less, which is a good thing. But the job growth market around here hasn't really gained much, so we haven't added a lot of new jobs. It's basically just full employment within the area, which is a lot better than 10 years ago, we'll say. Year-to-date collections were $139.2 million for the first half of 2019 compared to $135.8 million for 2018. So we have seen a 1.6%, I believe, and 3.2% growth for the first 2 quarters of this year. So I think we have a good chance of making our target number. We'll see how the AIM payments shake out and how the fourth quarter goes. So I believe that we have a good track on that. As of the same as the distribution of $290 million, the revenue coming in for the county, 116.2 of that would be distributed to localities. A great impact to a lot of the towns and villages that are around the county. On page 8, this is a total summary by calculation of the $596 million of non-property tax revenue. On page 9, this is a comparison year over year. I just want to notice 2 big numbers before I talk about some specifics. You can tell that the local tax items and the department income items of both the A fund and the nursing home fund are greatly skewed. We changed the classifications of some of those revenues to what category they fall in. It nets out, if you put the tax items, department and miscellaneous together, in the A fund, it's about $10 million, roughly the sales tax increase. Also, you can see it in the nursing home that the Medicaid and IGT revenues were switched, so it nets out to an extra $4.5 million difference in the nursing home. So, hotel, we'll hit some of the bigger specifics. The hotel motel tax, we're predicting flat for 2020. We're going to be a little short to maybe making the number this year. The summer season wasn't as good as we would hope. Of that, $2.9 million is attributed to debt service, $4.3 million goes to the convention center, and $1.5 to the Visitors Bureau. We all know the hotel tax breakdown. That's always something to talk about.
Mr. Miller? A question on the hotel tax. Are we going after the Airbnbs for trying to collect those?
That's definitely something that could be looked at. There's some counties within New York that have, we've researched it. Yeah, there's a few that have signed on the state law that allows you to, the enforcement of that, it's something that we have to look to internally. We have to internally be able to monitor this program. And that's currently what we're working on, looking and seeing what necessities would be to implement it in that regard.
Well, I understood that we couldn't do that because of the definition of hotel in our statute, and it had to be changed at the assembly and at the state level.
I think you're right, you have to have a home
We
rule.
researched that a couple of years ago, and,
They did put out some legislation
did they?
pertaining to the Airbnb recently. I think it was
It's a
2 or 3
no-brainer.
years ago.
They collect the money for you,
2
they
years
send
ago.
it to you.
Yeah.
It's really, and it's growing exponentially in the last 4 years.
Oh, I totally agree, and it's really not fair to the hotels either. I mean, on a personal regard, if they're paying for, tax on those rooms, if somebody can undercut it, it's not a fair gig on that. Other unclassified revenues on page 8 total 1.254 million, roughly. This is due to reserves and debt service requirements needed. The comptroller, he was still here, would tell you that they went out and refied some stuff, some bonds this year, changing the reserve amount that was needed, and this was put back to against the debt service, basically, mostly in the V fund of $900,000 and $300,000 at the nursing home. State aid is forecasted to increase almost $1 million for 2020. This is largely due to statewide implementation and raise the age funding. Some of that was denied. Also, the raise the age funding in a few departments, as you'll see when you do the individual department breakdown. They're supposed to cover all incremental costs, but there have been some issues with the state wanting to cover personnel matters in some departments, like our legal department. But we're still working on trying to alleviate that. Federal aid is forecasted at an extra $500,000 for 2020. This is attributed to mostly about $800,000 Medicare funding. The Medicare rate, due to all the upgrades out there, is going to greatly increase once the first of the year comes. The director out there will come in and talk to you about the early filing for getting the rate increased for January 1. And the anticipated revenue that will be associated with that in more detail. And finally, at the bottom line, at the nursing home, because it's self-contained, see about $5.4 million in revenue, and that's in combination with the Medicare rates, the Medicaid rate. Your capital component will be significantly increased due to the debt service adjustment and paid for by the state. I think that goes through this packet. I gave some summaries that were for a previous resolution that was requested by this body. That's for some light reading. For going through, I don't expect about 15 pages. We probably do that at our leisure, and I'd take any questions if we want to start there. If you have any other things you'd like me to hit while I'm here.
I just want to quickly I know you can just breeze right through these. Can you tell me about the OTB increase? 25%?
OTB increase, I think that's in my part.
And the internet sales tax expectation.
So, OTB is trending probably for about $400,000 this year. We kept it flat. It's in Department 1340. We kept it flat for 2020 as...
What page on there?
151. I think it's a reasonable number that we can hit, but ultimately, I think that OTB is going to be something that's going to decrease in the future. It is something that, they have, the managers at OTB have tried to address with their capital shift and trying to keep their funding streams open. With the opening of the casinos, they have a lot more competition. Let's face reality. We have a regional casino in Schenectady. It's the few spots left that OTB opens. The clientele is not up as high as it used to be. So that should, I think in the future, we'll see that dip and decline as we go forward. What was the internet sales tax question again?
Our expectation.
So, when we formulated the budget, and when we did the finalizations with the legislature last year, we were expecting probably 5 to 6 million, depending on when the first tranche was supposed to go into effect, and the date had changed a couple times by the state because they were trying to sell other programs. So I'll tell you 5-6 million, and then I'll tell you I can't get you a number. And I don't mean it to be as facetious as that. It's just the way that it's calculated. I can formulate what the state believed we were going to get. I can prorate that for the population, and that's where the 6.5 million comes from increase. I can't tell you what happens at Tax and Finance because the questions are so broad in the way they file. One would love to say that electronic sales were a category, which they probably should be, that is easily trackable and easily fileable, but it's not. We'll say, I'll pick something out of the ordinary. A mattress company. If you ordered a mattress online, there's no saying that mattress is going to go to online shopping or mattresses. It's going to be filed by the person if they owe the sales tax or whatnot, but it's not going to be categorized directly as that. Now, I can tell you that electronic sales have gone up. They're doing kind of what's expected, and I think the 6 million is a good, reasonable number. For me to put that onto a piece of paper and say the $6,293,508 is going to be tough, at least in the short term, until Tax and Finance possibly directs otherwise. There was a second part of the question, Madam Chair.
That was it.
Oh.
Do we have any other questions? Mr. Mendick?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. We had a recent change in retirees' healthcare vesting from 20 years to 15 years. What has this budget contemplated as an additional cost for 2020 for that change?
All right, so I put it, and I just got a little scratch sheet. It's roughly 51.8 million for 2019. Put an increase across the board of about 3%, 2.89%. And we put retiree health care up 3.5% due to the added people that might come onto the list.
So you're talking about a 4.4% increase?
I'm talking, we usually do about 2.5. I'm putting a full point into the retiree health care.
A full point on, what was your base again?
At 10 million.
So about $100,000?
$1 million.
Yeah.
$1 million or $100,000?
Let me get back to you on that
Okay.
directly.
What line is that? What page is that?
So it's. Where's the retiree healthcare? It's like snacked onto the back of the A summary. 277, it's gotta be around there. Where's that? That's not retirement. 279 will be like a little cheat sheet.
279? Okay.
Yep. It's the A fund summary. If you see about a third of the way down, you see hospital medical.
Yep.
Insurance.
Okay.
9 million, almost 9.1, and then 9.3, almost 9.4 for 2020.
And
2020.
It went down.
And that's most of your employees. The nursing home and the DPW sewer also have their own little ones, but they're not as massive as that. So it's probably about 10.2 altogether. I can give you a full breakdown.
okay, but I guess what I'm trying to figure out, how much of that is just a a annual cost of living increase component versus how much is for the additional people added to the plan. So
I think we did double the increase. I think we usually do 2. I think we did 4 across the board on the retiree part because we were figuring that increase plus the COLA aspect of it would be a number that we could at least start with.
So, okay, and let me break that down. If we usually did 2 and this is 4, so are we saying that the approximate difference between the 2019 adjusted at $9,057,000 and the requested at $9,374,000, let's say roughly $300,000, half of that is for the new people being added on because of this change? So $150,000.
I think it's a good start. I mean, we also have our enrollees from the year over year have been down.
Okay.
And we expect that to go up. I mean, it's always a trending game with that. It's hard, you take it as a big, multiple aspects of it. To point it out exactly like that is a little bit tough, but yes, you can.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get a handle on it so that, when we talked about it, we said we couldn't put a number on it. I knew we had to, and I was just trying to figure out what the number was.
Like, we are self-insured. If you have.
Right.
It could blow that out of the water. We've had, kidney transplants that take $1 million of that 10.
Yep, understood. And obviously, that is going to be our higher age demographic that's going into that. Okay, that's what I needed. Thank you very much.
Well, just, Sean, but in 2018, it was 9.3, and it was 9 million in 2019, so typically, we went down.
We're running on trend for that 9 million this year.
So we're going back up to 9.3 according to your adjusted 20.
Yeah. That's a 9.3 actual. I think it was 8.7 for that year, so it was about 600 under in that year. Now, the year before that, I think it was about 500 over. But I'd have to get you a log back. I think we did a 5-year breakdown.
Well, I think that you've given a great presentation, so unless we have any other questions from members?
Just a couple, Madam Chair.
Pardon me?
Just a couple if I would.
I'm looking for you, Mr. Grimm.
The 692 is actually, 692 million is how much we're going to spend in 2020.
Yes.
Because we count money twice. We count money twice. That's how you get to the 733.
I take out that 40 million in transfers to balance accounts and stuff of that nature. Because it is kind of like,
confusing.
both ends of the accounting equation. You have to balance the accounts, so.
What's the
expected
increase in sales tax projection percentage-wise, and what was it last year?
3.5%. I believe we came to 4 this year with the extra internet sales.
Actual. Actual or your projection?
Projected. Yeah, projected for next year's 3.5%.
For this year, it was projected at?
4.
Okay, it was projected at 4.
We ran a point high from the year before.
Gotcha.
So we settled on 4, I believe, at the end of the year. With running about a point high on 2018, 4%, and then 3.5 projected, or 10 million for 2020. And I believe we're going to hit the number pretty good this year.
As it proposed, there's a slight decrease in the county tax rate.
Yes.
That is, if you have your home and your assessment's the same, you're going to spend less, unless there's some adjustments that break that, and there's a strong threatening of that. Let me just ask you about this. The DA's, because there's difference between the DA, who says he needs 35 new positions, and the county executive said 6 will do. And his position tonight was, well, I know more about this. Basically, I think that's a fair accusation.
I believe that that's totally accurate, and it's definitely for discussion here. I can only give what other counties have done.
I mean, there was some thought given to your projection. I just want to make that clear. There was some thought on your part.
Yes,
the 6
we know that this data aspect, this data transference aspect it's huge. All the intricacies of the other aspects by the DA, he's probably one of the better examples of that. He has championed in that this has got to be significant fiscal impact through his agencies. He was very helpful in providing us his full budget, which we filed all of our needs with NISAC, New York Association of Counties, to go to the state and say, hey, this is all the counties, and they're saying top to bottom, and those asks are widely different. And I think it,
Yeah,
you know,
it's fine.
prudence to give good monitoring on that.
And we asked for
definitely
those
working forward
numbers
too.
because these other counties are not going to add 35 people. I'm sure that everyone is dealing with this differently, and we need to know how that's being done.
I have, I mean, I think Erie County may have added, the executive may have proposed 8 or 10, and they're 3 times our size.
Yeah.
But what did the district attorney propose in Erie County?
I believe that the executive went along with the district attorney there.
Well, I mean,
And-
those
but
are the
that's-
sorts of things that I think we need to know, yeah.
And that's not adopted, that their legislative body hasn't
Proposed.
acted on that.
Yeah, proposed.
It's definitely a big, $4 million, as you know, that's more than your tax cap would have been.
It's over 50% of the budget, of the current budget, 58. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, you're very welcome. Are there any other questions? No questions, we will thank you.
Chair.
for
Good job,
this
Sean.
Presentation. And motion to adjourn.
Motion.
Motion, no move. Voice open.